Hello, I'm Jane Mangold from the Agricultural Research Service, here to present an Ag Minute. We are often troubled to hear about large wildfires, sometimes in some of our favorite wild places and hunting spots, or most productive grazing allotments and firewood gathering areas. Wildfire is a natural process, however, that occurs at fairly regular intervals in this part of the world. Fire frequency is a key determinant of plant community structure and composition. For example, in the prairies of the Midwest, fires can recur as often as every 2 to 3 years, destroying colonizing trees and maintaining the prairie as grassland. In productive big sagebrush plant associations in the Northwest, such as those characterized by Idaho fescue, fires typically occur about once every 10 to 25 years. This week I'll be discussing how vegetation responds to fire, including some unique ways vegetation survives in fire-dominated landscapes. Understanding the effects of fire on vegetation may help us to better appreciate its influence on sagebrush steppe and forest ecosystems in eastern Oregon. Plants that live in fire-dominated landscapes have developed some unique adaptations for survival. Most grasses, which are an important component of shrub steppe communities like those of the northern Great Basin, have meristems, or points of growth, at or below the ground surface. A light, quickly moving surface fire is unlikely to harm meristems, even though the tops of the plants may be destroyed. Several tree and shrub species have the ability to resprout from their roots or buds underneath the bark if the above-ground portions of the plant are killed or severely damaged by fire. Some tree species, such as ponderosa pine, have very thick bark that protects the tree's cambium during a surface fire. This species also tends to shed its lower branches to prevent them from serving as a fire ladder into the tree canopy. Some other conifers, like lodgepole pine, display serotiny, in which they retain their seeds in tightly sealed cones for many years. The cones are sealed by resin, which melts during a fire, releasing seeds. Over the next couple days, I will talk about some specific responses of plants typical of eastern Oregon. Today I'd like to talk about how fire affects bluebunch wheatgrass, one of the most common grasses in eastern Oregon. As I mentioned yesterday, grasses typically aren't killed by fire because their growing tissue, or meristem, is below ground. Bluebunch wheatgrass usually responds favorably to fire. Because bluebunch has coarse stems and little leafy material, the tops burn quickly and little heat is transferred downward into the meristem tissue. Most studies suggest a decrease in productivity 1 year following fire, with increased productivity in subsequent years. In Wyoming, bluebunch wheatgrass production was nearly 4 times higher on burned sites than unburned sites 3 years following the fire. Timing of the burn is an important factor in determining the effects of fire. Bluebunch probably suffers the least damage if burned while dormant, and the most damage if burned while actively growing. For example, in Central Oregon, late September burns significantly increased mean basal area of bluebunch wheatgrass, while late May burns slightly decreased basal area. Bottlebrush squirreltail responds similarly to fire as bluebunch wheatgrass. Idaho fescue, on the other hand, may be damaged by fire because it grows in a dense, fine-leaved tuft which carries heat to the base of the plant and closer to the meristem. Tomorrow I'll talk about fire effects on some common shrubs. I hope you'll join me then. Yesterday I talked about the effect of fire on some common rangeland grasses. The rate at which rangeland shrubs recover after a fire is variable, depending on whether the shrub is capable of resprouting or if it regenerates from seed. Wyoming big sagebrush is killed by fire and must reestablish from seeds in the soil, from seeds produced by remnant plants that escaped fire, and from plants adjacent to the burned area whose seeds are dispersed by various vectors. Although recovery can be very slow, fire is the principal means of renewal for decadent stands of Wyoming big sagebrush. Bitterbrush, wax currant, and mountain mahogany are some additional shrubs that must regenerate from seed following fire. Resprouting shrubs may be top-killed by fire, but often sprout vigorously afterwards. Green rabbitbrush is a good example of a resprouting shrub. Because fire may temporarily eliminate big sagebrush and other shrubs that take longer to reestablish, shrubs like green rabbitbrush may be released from competition and therefore increase on burned range sites. Although production may be reduced for 1 to 3 years after fire, rabbitbrush then increases rapidly. Studies have documented a 4 to 9-fold increase in production within the first 20 years. Tomorrow I'll talk about how fire affects weedy species like cheatgrass and Dalmatian toadflax. Today's Ag Minute will focus on how fire affects weedy species like cheatgrass, Dalmatian toadflax, and Canada thistle. Unfortunately, if weeds are present in an area prior to a fire, they are likely to increase after the fire. Canada thistle and Dalmatian toadflax are adapted to both survive fire and to colonize recently burned sites. They can sprout vegetatively from their extensive creeping root system or colonize via seeds. Weeds with large, perennial taproots, like spotted knapweed, may survive a fire if the root crown is not killed. Many weeds produce large quantities of seed that can survive fire and enable the species to recolonize quickly. For example, Dalmatian toadflax increased its seed production from 7 to 79 seeds per plant on unburned plots to 158 to 1,300 seeds per plant on burned plots. It has been well documented that the weedy annual grass, cheatgrass, benefits from fire and even alters fire regimes to favor its continued dominance. Well-planned and timely weed management is imperative following a fire if the area is known to contain weeds. This wraps up our discussion of fire effects on vegetation. We've only touched the surface of this fascinating topic, but I hope you have a better appreciation of how fire shapes plant communities. I'm Jane Mangold. Thanks for listening.